that before you ran away, because I know when you're playing live, you can't really blame the dice rolls, but when you're playing on MapTool, it's the same as, you know, if you're playing a soccer or something and you're losing, you kind of want to blame the referee. So if you're on MapTool and you get a lot of bad rolls, you kind of want to be, oh, it's MapTool's fault. It's not my fault. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, in fact, one of the frameworks, I was reading about a GM whose players were complaining that, you know, oh, the NPCs always roll 20s and we always roll 1s. So what the GM let them do was choose. They could choose, they had a little checkbox, and when the dice was rolled, it would either roll 1 through 20 or 20 through 1. It would invert their roll. So they could choose the checkbox, and if they thought that the random number generator was, you know, really being bad for them that day, they could turn the checkbox on, and all the dice rolls that came out would be inverted in the opposite direction. That way there could never be any complaint that the random number generator was tilted towards, you know, all 1s or all 20s, because they could choose before they made the roll which way it was going to come out.
And I will say that this is such a common question. Craig, who's the other main developer on MapTool, has said that his primary role now is defending the random number generator in the forums.
It is a silly question. I mean, it's not a silly question because people don't know. But if you're a Java developer, you know that the generator that's used, the secure random generator is what it's called. The secure random number generator is very good. I mean, this is at the level of what the NSA uses. I mean, that's how good it is. So yeah, this is not, if you happen to have a string of a lot of 20s, well, don't blame it on Java's random number generator. Now, it could be that the person that wrote the framework, maybe they're fudging things a little bit. I mean, think about it. If I wrote the framework, I would always roll 20s.
Well, and I used to joke because I had Trevor Croft, one of the original developers on the thing. I'd bring him into games because Trevor was a great guy, but he seldom gamed, and so I would actually make him use MapTool for a while as a player. And so many great things came out of that. He saw the needs of the players at that point. But I used to always joke because for whatever reason he always rolled really, really well. And I asked him, "Okay, Trevor, how do you set the Trevor bit?" But it truly was just a random thing.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Yep. Good night, guys.
Have a good night, Azhrei. Thanks again for joining us.
You bet.
So we're just going to temporarily mute the stream, and again, we'll be back in about a minute or two. Alright, we're back. So in chat, is there anything in particular you folks would like to see demoed with MapTool? Any questions you have about how it works, how to set anything up? I suppose the obvious first step would be you head over to rptools.net and you download the program. That's rptools.net. And, well, why don't we just go through some of the options available. So one thing, key difference between different editions of D&D or RPGs in general is whether or not to count diagonals. And MapTool can account for this. If you don't want to count diagonals as extra movement, that is, you know, you pretend we live in a world where there is no hypotenuse, no Pythagoras, you set the movement metric to 1, 1, 1. Or you can set it to 1, 2, 1, which follows the 3.5 D&D rules where every second diagonal square counts as 2 squares. And there seems to be other options as well, Manhattan and no diagonals. I guess no diagonals prevents you from moving diagonally altogether. Manhattan, I have no idea, to be honest.
I'll be honest, I've never used that. But you're correct about the no diagonals. It forces you to go along squares.
And if you're using one of those crazy systems that actually uses hexes, you have the option between horizontal, vertical hexes. You can adjust the map grid size. I find that's very useful because I make my own sort of set piece maps. And so in Photoshop I'll scale them so that every square is either 72 or 50 pixels, and if you don't want to be resizing the map once you pop it into MapTool to get it to align with the grid, you can just set the default grid map size to the same size as whatever you create or whatever you use. Keith, what is the standard used on the forums by the community?
You know, it depends because a lot of people download their stuff off Dungeon Genie, and they have a default size over there. I typically use 100, but a lot of people use 50. And what it comes down to is how large is your map. And so if you've got a fairly small map, you can get by with a larger resolution because it takes less memory on the individual client machines. If you've got a larger map, you might consider going down to a 50. And if you've got a really small map, some people go up to 200 to get that really high resolution because you can zoom in as close as you want to in MapTool and still see that resolution. So it's really based on the size of the map from my point of view. That said, I think the standard, most people use about 100. It still gives you some great detail on your images without using a lot of memory.
Great question from Spidey411 in the chat. He plays a lot of urban games. He's wondering, what about buildings outside as in elevation? Can he put Spider-Man on a roof and Wolverine in the street and have a line of sight to reflect that?
Not currently. Elevation is one of the most requested. We were talking earlier about request, and elevation is one of those things that would be a nice to have. The way many people use that is they use states, which we haven't talked about MapTool states, but it allows you to say whether somebody's wounded or flying or prone or whatever. And so when that becomes important, you can use that. Now, getting down to the little nitty-gritty of MapTool, there's something called health bars in there that you can link to a stat, and one of those stats could be elevation. And so you could have high, medium, low, or very high, or however you want to do it. And the health bar would actually show the elevation of the character on the token. But as far as line of sight goes, no, there's nothing in MapTool currently that does that.
So, whoops. Right now I'm connected here as a player, so a lot of these options are grayed out, but obviously for the Game Master, actually that's the point right there. You can log into a server as either a player or a Game Master, and you don't have to be the server host in order to be the Game Master. The host can put in a GM password, and other people can connect as Game Master, but yeah, so the Game Master would have all these options available here under Map. You can turn off the Fog of War. You can make a map invisible to players because MapTool holds multiple, I guess, layers of maps, I suppose you can say. So if we click on the top right here, you'll see Cathedral of Shadow, Chamber of Eyes, etc. These are all different maps. And if you don't want one revealed to the players just yet, as in they haven't arrived at the location and you don't want them seeing it preemptively, you set the entire map to hidden, and when the time is appropriate you reveal it. You can enable or disable the Fog of War. I don't really know why you'd want to disable it though. It's such a lovely feature.
Some people don't like it. They want the players to be able to see the entire map. And the interesting thing is that because of the way the vision is created inside of MapTool, you can specify a vision distance. So you can have players that can see the entire map, but they can only see 100 squares ahead of them. And so they're not going to see anything outside of that range, but they can see the map, they can see the terrain. And so typically that might be done for an overland adventure versus like a dungeon adventure.
Then we have the different macro windows, right? We have campaign and I believe global. Are those the two?
Yeah, there's four. There's campaign, global, selected, and impersonated. A lot of players, when they come in, will impersonate their token, and that's the way they stay. And you'll see that in the chat window. In the MapTool screen, you'll see Nemiranis, that more than likely that's been impersonated. And so you see their icon image beside any text that they type. And so that's what the impersonated window does. So if you've impersonated your character, in fact, when I'm a player, often I'll do that and just bring the impersonated window up, and it shows all the macro buttons for that character. Selected is much the same, and that's used more for the GM or if you're controlling multiple players. So whatever token you have the rights to select, and that means that you're effectively the token owner for that. You see the macros available for that guy. In the campaign mode, those are tokens that are available to the campaign. So anybody that has the campaign loaded, and one of the things under the covers that happens, you have the server that the GM may create, and then you have your clients that come in and connect into it. But all those guys get those campaign macros. And the last one is global, and global is to the individual PC. So those will not be shared with other players, but those are macros that a GM might use for map creation or setting up tokens that he doesn't want the individual players to be able to see. So, and that very much flowed out of the requirements from the user base in the day when macros were created.
So these macros that I'm showing here, these are ones that come with the framework. As was explained, a framework is a collection of macros. These are built to handle the one we use, in fact, I believe it's DN's 4E framework, and we'll see if I can pull up a link to that.
Right, and the macros are accessible a few ways. You need to type the macro name inside of your chat window, and it will, if you know the proper macro command, it'll pop up. But most people associate those with buttons, and in fact, currently with MapTool, the only way to create a macro is with a button. So a button has to exist for that guy somewhere. Going forward, that won't be the case, especially when we get JavaScript in as a programming language. It'll be very different at that point. But at this point, macro and button are the same thing. And so, as you said, your player actually created the macro buttons for to automate some of their attacks. But the GM has some special abilities to create something called a lib token. And a lib token is a very special thing that's seen across all maps. that allows you to code those frameworks. And so if you see lib : deviant null framework, that's what deviant null has put together for his framework, and those macros can be seen across all maps. But the way that MapTool is coded right now, the macro is associated with a token. So when you leave one map for another map, if that token isn't present, then that macro isn't present. So that's where the lib tokens come in the framework discussion.
Circling back to height, as was a follow-up question in the chat, there was mention of a bar that could be used for flight altitude then, and I think that refers, right now we have, I guess, hit point bars. Could a bar be added to represent altitude?
Very much so. Those bars are associated with a token property, and while I haven't done this, so all this may be malarkey, but all that health bar is linked to your maximum hit points versus your current hit points. You should be able to do the same thing with elevation, where you would have to define elevation layers in there. It'd be much like hit points, and you would set your elevation by setting that property, and it should affect the health bar. And I believe you can have one health bar per corner of the token, right? And so in effect, I think you can have up to 4. And so one of those could be elevation if you chose to use it that way. I'll tell you that in the games that I played that utilized elevation, things like Space 1889 that had the cloud ships on Mars, we wound up doing that with the state versus the health bar that we're discussing. But in theory, it's all possible with the health bar to show your elevation.
Another question from the chat. How do you set different light options for the players so that if one player has dark vision but the others don't, they should see different things when they go into a room than someone with either low light or normal vision? The person says that they can't seem to get this right when they try to work that out.
That is indeed one of the strengths of MapTool, is the fact that you can have dark vision, low light vision, normal vision, and when you select a token, you see what that token can see. What you would do is double-click on a token property, or double-click on a token, and it would bring up on the config tab after the double-click. You would see down there it has shape, size, properties, and has sight. You want to click the has sight checkbox, and then you want to select the kind of vision they have. We have some that are defined already in MapTool. Those are changed via the edit. I think it's campaign properties. Let me see. Yes, under edit campaign properties, you see 2 buttons. One's light and one's sight on those tabs. Sight allows you to set the different sights, and if you bring that up, you'll see like dark vision has a R60, which means it has a radius of 60. Low light vision is circle times 2, x2. That means you're going to see twice as far in low light as you are with normal vision. Then you see the conic vision that Az was talking about earlier in there. And so that plays into when you double click on a token on that config tab. When that comes up, you select the vision type of the token there. And one of the confusing things often is that very much interacts with light. So sight interacts with light. So if you have to have a light source for that sight to take effect. The other thing that will bite you there is on the map. You have, in the map menu, you have an option there called Vision, and you have off, day, and night. So day is going to show you everything. Off means it's not going to have vision at all. So whatever you set in the token property is not going to take effect unless you do something. Night is kind of where the magic happens, where the light interacts with the sight and it limits your vision. And so if you're needing vision to be limited, night is probably what you want to select.
And just to demonstrate here, we've given this Etin low light vision, and presently the only light source in this room is coltane with I guess it's a lantern or something that sheds 5 squares of light. So coltane, being a human, normal vision, can only see up to 5 squares. Etin low light vision, by the 3rd edition rules, that doubles the light radius, and he can see twice as far.
I'll also say that NPC versus PC has an effect on that as well. So you need to make sure that your token is selected as a PC and has the has site on the token properties.
One question, is there any way to temporarily give a particular PC a peek at the GM view of the room? One of my players is Daredevil, which allows me to hide practically nothing from him within a certain distance. Is there any way for me to reflect this? I suppose Daredevil is blind, so he sort of has this echolocation, can hear where everything is, something to that effect.
Yeah, as was talked about earlier, that's one of the things that we don't have right now. One of the things you could do is give him dark vision, which means he doesn't need light. Dark vision doesn't require any light to see. In which case you would give him dark vision at whatever radius you wanted to give him, and he should be able to see without light.
So as you'll see, if I have Coltane selected, we just see in this small pool of light, but if I select the Eden, who now has dark vision, you can see much further. I suppose it's still restricted by line of sight. I wonder though if would Daredevil be able to hear through walls?
Well, and that's something that MapTool does not do right now, and we talked about that a little bit earlier about the ability to see through vision blocking layer. That's not currently something that MapTool can do. However, thinking about it, a workaround to that would be you could give that player ownership of a marker token with vision, and let him move it behind walls, or you move it behind walls for him, and he would see what was behind those walls, and only he would see that.
That's a fantastic workaround. So Keith, one thing you mentioned about the framework you use is it's all very automated, right?
Correct.
And now I believe I was seeing in the community there was some distinction between people who wanted everything to be automated or as much as possible, while others, in particular the Deviant Null framework, where there's still some, I suppose, user input, or it doesn't quite do all the steps towards automation. I don't know if I'm expressing that properly, but it sort of wants to at least make sure that a human signs off on everything and can add in little modifiers here and there before something goes through all the way. So it won't automatically deduct hit points from a token, whereas I think your framework, you can configure it, or you do have it configured to automatically, you roll the attack, it automatically determines whether it hits or misses, and automatically deals the damage. I'm not sure if your framework specifically does that. I know some do exist though.
There are some that do that. Mine actually does not. I made the design decision early on for mine not to do that automatically, even though it does choose the target and it tells you whether you hit or missed based on that target's attributes. With game systems, sometimes depending on how many supplements you have, especially in the D&D world, but even Savage World is this way as well, that you can't code everything into a framework. It'd be a full-time job. And so you need, in my opinion, you need that GM interaction to decide whether or not that attack actually did hit. And it happens in face-to-face games as well. Some guy rolls a d20. He said, "Oh, I hit," And then the, oh, but you forgot to do this, you forgot to do that, you forgot to do this, you got to do that. And said, oh, I missed, kind of thing, right? But just by the base roll, he did hit. But some of the frameworks actually do that, and they will pop up a window to the GM that says, do you want to apply this damage or not? And the GM has the option of saying yes or no. I didn't quite go that far with mine, but there are some that have. Now that said, there are some people that they don't want a framework. They like the properties being in there that you can reference from a macro if you want to, but all they really want is something called a dice box, which it lets players select the dice they want to roll, just like you would in a face-to-face game, and it rolls the die, like say, okay, you roll a d20 to hit, roll 2d4 damage, and that's all those frameworks actually do.
And that's part of the beauty of MapTool, that wherever you fall on that spectrum, whatever your opinion is, MapTool will be able to support you. Well, presuming people have created it, and given what the community has made, you pretty much can find whatever you need. If not, find people who will help to build it. Because yeah, there are those people that want it as automated as possible, that it automatically deals the damage. Others, like yourself, like myself, like Deviant Null, who want